So for my final project for this class, my project is titled Interpersonal Communication Skills for Emergency Medical Personnel, a portfolio of activities for continued learning and engagement. According to Measle et al., 2011, in the United States alone, roughly 18 million people aged 18 and up are given pre-hospital care by emergency medical services per year. With operations in every state, EMS providers come in close contact with their communities. They provide prevention information, wellness checks, and emergency care. A field that encompasses more than just EMTs and paramedics, but also mobile intensive care unit paramedics and nurses, combat medics, flight medics, doctors, and more. The people in this field often have to rely on their communication skills in order to reassure and gain information. With both public and private ambulance services in the United States, it's important for EMS personnel to understand the roles they have when interacting with others. While these interactions may be short in the grand scope of things, the information given and acquired during a call by EMS workers can impact the rest of a patient's care. So, for the project rationale, considered a first response career, EMS is often just seen as another healthcare profession. An important thing to remember, however, is that EMS are often the first point of contact for people and their loved ones during a medical emergency. EMS personnel need to not only have the medical knowledge to deal with these situations, but also the communication skills to deal with patients, loved ones, and coworkers. In refresher and in-service training classes, EMS personnel are kept up to date on new medical practices. However, they are not given research-based methods on how to best handle the communication aspect of the field. While there are a number of theories within the field of health communication that hypothesize on what practices can make patient-provided interactions smoother, there isn't a lot of practical application of these theories currently. This portfolio highlights that interpersonal communication theory is most prevalent to provider-patient communication and creates activities that can be used in EMS training to help manage communication better. Not only do these activities highlight the core concepts of a few theories used in health communication, but they also call for the intersection of health communication and intercultural communication, not only when it comes to the practical application of these theories. The overall goal of this portfolio is to provide a framework that can be used to help translate communication theories into something those without a background in communication studies can use and apply on the job. For my final, I've created a portfolio with activities in it that cover 5 major interpersonal communication theories that can be applied to the field of EMS. These communication theories are presented in a way that make them easy to implement into in-service and refresher courses, with the overall goal being that the use of these activities, EMS groups will be able to gain a deeper understanding of the interpersonal communication skills that are utilized in the field. Not only do these activities allow personnel to think about the skills they are using, but it will also give them the opportunity to implement new skills that come out of research theory. This portfolio has been created with the fact in mind that many of the people running these trainings and taking these courses are not communication scholars, keeping the language and concepts simplistic in order to make sure that complex verbiage doesn't hinder comprehension. These activities focus on kinesthetic movement and simulation activities to demonstrate the key concepts that come out of interpersonal communication scholarship, which will hopefully make it easier for people to implement these strategies even when there are heavy stress inside of the field. The activities in this portfolio allows leaders of EMS training to gain a better knowledge of theory as well as to implement the activities provided to them. There is a common structure used for all of the activities: theory, goals and objectives, description, and variations. The theory section will provide a basic overview of the theory within the context of health and EMS. While understanding theory in depth is not as important to lay people when compared to academics, by introducing the theories, EMS providers are given the ability to research these theories on their own and to think of personal ways that they can integrate this information into their work. After this will be a listing of the goals and objectives of these activities, making sure that instructors know what information students should have gained through the activity. The main portion of this is the description of the activity. After listing the supplies needed, the possible setup time, and the amount of time it will take for the activity to be completed, there will be an in-depth explanation of how to lead and run the activities. Some of these activities will focus on patient-provider interactions, while others are applicable to both patient-provider interactions and provider-provider interactions. As medics typically run calls with a single partner, activities will use 2 providers for all reenacting scenarios. If the organization uses a standard of 3 medics per truck, these activities can be adjusted to reflect this. For some activities, people will be instructed to work with their typical shift partner, while for others, they will be instructed to work with someone that they are not commonly working with in order to help gain new knowledge and to work on new skills. After description of the activity, there will be an outline on how the instructor can debrief the activity. This will include overall recap of the activity, what they should have learned, as well as some questions to leave for further discussion. The overall rationale for this is that every day there are thousands of medical interventions done by EMTs, helping both the long and short-term care of the general public. While there's been a decent amount of research done into patient nurse, patient doctor, and patient medical insurance carrier communication, there isn't a lot studied about the relationship between EMS providers and patients, let alone is any of this information practically applied. Rubin, 2016, found that there is resistance from healthcare providers to change old practices, especially in things like communication, and there is also a poor translation of theory for those who do not have a communication background. Many communication theories are rooted in the complexities of humans and the impact that individuality has on communication, which also goes against a lot of the belief of people in hard sciences, which also makes it difficult for a lot of them to accept a lot of these theories. Another major thing is that many healthcare providers want to be able to generalize communication so they can focus more on the medical side, meaning they seem to brush away a lot of the aspects such as the communication skills needed. Following the description as well will be a brief overview of any variations that can be done, both to the activity itself as well as how it can be revised for groups that might have different crew situations and such. There are 5 theories from interpersonal communication chosen as frameworks for the activities in this portfolio. Affect theory of social exchange, information manipulation theory, communication privacy management theory, nonverbal communication, and compliance gaining strategies. These are the 5 most researched theories related to EMS interpersonal communication already, and have been researched within the context of healthcare communication. As a whole, EMS is lacking in research from all social sciences due to the difficulty in accurately and ethically replicating situations for study. The goal of using these 5 theories as a framework for the activities is to introduce major communication theory relevant to EMS personnel and to apply these concepts to realistic situations. Each activity, while having the potential for crossover, focuses on a single theory in order to better reinforce the ideas that are being taught throughout the activity. For the first activity, the leader would be given a scenario of information exchange in the field. They would explain in depth the scenario, the information being exchanged, etc. After this, they would then go around to each group and assign a different emotion. Giving each crew a few minutes to discuss, they will then have each group explain or act out how they think the emotion would affect the example of social exchange. This would then be followed by a breakdown of the theory and the ways in which emotion plays into it. For the second activity, crews would run silent calls. Given scenarios, in some cases the patient will be silent and in others the team will be. When the patient is silent, the crew must work on using nonverbal cues in order to get through the call and to give proper care. In the case where the crew is silent to each other, they will be able to speak with the patient, but they will have to use nonverbal cues in order to communicate with each other how to run a call. This is done in order to reinforce what it might be like working in conditions where you cannot really hear what someone is saying, and you have to focus on these nonverbal communication cues in order to gain a better understanding of the situation. For the third activity, there will be a focus on the strategies in McLaughlin et al.'s 1980 typology of compliance gaining strategies. After giving clear definition of these strategies, scenarios will be given and teams must pick which one of these compliance gaining strategies they would use in order to get compliance from the patient and how they believe this would work out at the end. Crews would then compare, contrast, and defend or yield the decision to the group in order to gain a better understanding of how other crews might work and to possibly learn some new information on how they might be able to handle a situation. For the fourth activity, crews will work together as one giant group in order to break down communication privacy management theory and to create scenarios where they might see this in action in the field. While this one isn't such directly correlated to an actual call or to kinesthetic movement, I believe that actually understanding this theory is very helpful to EMS personnel. For the last activity, we would have crews running call drills. So given a scenario, one person in the group who is not in the crew will act as the patient, and they will be given something to lie about and how to do so from a listing of strategies from this theory. The crews would then have to identify the way in which the patient is lying and attempt to gain compliance from the compliance gaining strategies from earlier. While most of the other ones are singularly focused. I believe that this is a good example of how you can use something that's been taught earlier throughout the day and show how this would be practically used inside of a situation. Since this is going to be a scenario situation, I think that this is a good way to just reinforce that information from the compliance gaining strategy section. There are a few major limits in this project, some of which stem from the topics and some of which stem from outside things. The biggest limit for not only this project, but to this topic as a whole, is the difficulty in gaining decent research about EMS. Due to a number of factors, it is hard to conduct research on EMS personnel and what they might be going throughout a call. From ethical and logistical barriers, there's a lot of work that exists in healthcare. However, when it's applied to EMS, it's typically done through something similar to transitive property math. So this is the idea that instead of doing research directly on EMS, they might apply research that has been done on nurses and say, well, if this works for nurses in healthcare, EMS is part of healthcare, therefore this information will work from nurses and to EMS personnel. So when we also go about talking moving forward, we also want to talk about any variations to this activity. So the activities themselves are pretty easily replicated by either utilizing kinesthetic learning or practical knowledge as a base. These activities rely on individuals participating in order to put themselves into the context of a theory. One way I could really think of also creating a variation that is a little bit different but yet is still focused on the same thing is by creating a set of these that is not for EMS personnel but instead for those who are likely to call it. So many people will come in contact with EMS at some point in their lives. However, people are not taught how to interact with personnel. I think that by taking the activities in this portfolio and adjusting them to be from the perspective of the patient, it might be able to make it easier for people to know what to do in an actual emergency situation. While it might seem like a strange thing to train people on what to do if they need EMS, research has found that this could be similar to a fire drill where if you are taught these kind of strategies before you actually have to engage with it, it'll go smoother and there won't be as much confusion or anxiety about a situation. In conclusion, while this portfolio is a specific set of theories for a specific set of people, it works to bring awareness to not only EMS personnel but to communication scholars as well. Emergency healthcare and interpersonal scholarship are just some of the fields of communication where theory can do more good if it can actually be used to better the world. The use of scholarship is wanted in many fields. It can be hard for people to find that proper overlap between theory and practicality. The goal of this portfolio is to show just one way in which people can bridge this gap. Overall, in an occupation where even the smallest miscommunication can have deadly consequences, it's important to constantly update training to reflect a changing and growing society. Between the movement for lay people to take control of their health, the growing diversity in the world, and the increased use of technology, the research that has been done about health communication needs to be synthesized and taught to people who work in the field. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation, and I've had a great time being in class with all of you.